The streets of Jerusalem were quieter than usual that evening as the nation waited for a critical update. Cameras turned toward the podium where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu prepared to address the country. His tone was steady but carried the weight of months of conflict, the kind that had tested the resilience of soldiers, families of hostages, and the entire nation. Netanyahu opened his remarks with a declaration that immediately set the tone for the night. We are on the verge of a very significant achievement. It's not final yet. We are working on it diligently, and I hope, God willing, that in the coming days, even during the Sukkot holiday, I will be able to announce the return of all our hostages, both the living and the fallen, in one phase, with the IDF remaining in the depth of the Strip and in the areas that control it. Those words carried both hope and caution. It was a moment many had been waiting for, yet the Prime Minister's phrasing underscored that nothing was guaranteed. The reference to the IDF's continued presence in Gaza was a clear message. Any potential breakthrough on the hostage issue would not come at the expense of Israel's security position on the ground. Netanyahu then reflected on the narrative that had surrounded the war since it began. Throughout the war, there were also those who constantly claimed that we would not be able to bring back all the hostages without a full and complete withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. I believed otherwise and acted otherwise. The statement was part rebuke, part vindication, addressed to critics who had argued that Israel's military leverage would have to be traded for concessions. He went on to credit the combination of military pressure and political resolve for the progress achieved so far. Thanks to the determined decisions I led together with the government, and thanks to the heroism of our fighters who pressured Hamas, we have so far returned 207 of our hostages. But I have never given up on the remaining hostages. I have also never given up on achieving the other goals of the war. These figures were more than numbers. For Israeli society, each of the 207 hostages returned represented a family reunited and a national promise kept. Yet the acknowledgement of those still in captivity served as a reminder that the mission remained incomplete. Netanyahu laid out what he described as the phased approach ahead. In the first stage, Hamas will release all our hostages, and IDF forces will be redeployed in a way that the IDF continues to hold all the areas that control the depth of the Strip. That statement signaled that Israel would not agree to a full withdrawal from Gaza, even as part of an initial hostage deal. It was an effort to assure the Israeli public, and likely the military leadership, that any agreement would not undermine the core strategic objectives pursued since the conflict began. The Prime Minister then addressed what he described as misinformation about Hamas's willingness to release hostages in earlier stages of the conflict. I hear that there are those who say today that Hamas was already willing a year ago or even 2 years ago to release all our hostages without us withdrawing fully from the Strip. Well, I tell you, that is simply a lie. By calling out what he labelled as false narratives, Netanyahu sought to reinforce his argument that the military campaign and the diplomatic coordination that accompanied it had been necessary to achieve progress. Moving to the broader vision for Gaza, he made one of the evening's most consequential statements. Now, in the second phase, Hamas will be disarmed and the Gaza Strip will be demilitarized. This will happen either through diplomatic means according to the Trump plan or militarily by us. I said this in Washington as well. Here, Netanyahu explicitly tied the next stage of the conflict's resolution to the plan proposed by President Donald Trump. The mention of Washington reinforced the close alignment with US mediation efforts and hinted at an ongoing strategic partnership that extended beyond the immediate crisis. The Prime Minister then explained the rationale for a bold military decision taken weeks earlier. To bring back our remaining 48 hostages, I instructed the IDF a few weeks ago to enter Hamas's most important stronghold, Gaza City. The move into Gaza City had been one of the most intense phases of the conflict, marked by heavy fighting and high stakes. Netanyahu revealed that it had been paired with a diplomatic initiative orchestrated alongside Washington. At the same time, I coordinated with President Trump and his team a diplomatic move that turned the tables in an instant. Instead of Israel being isolated, Hamas is isolated. The shift he described from Israel being diplomatically pressured to Hamas being cornered was portrayed as a key achievement. It reflected the view in Jerusalem that military operations and diplomatic maneuvers were complementary, not contradictory. He went on to explain the effect of this combined pressure. As a result of the intensified military pressure we applied and the diplomatic pressure, Hamas was forced to agree to the plan we brought. This statement suggested that the potential breakthrough in negotiations was not a result of Hamas's goodwill, but rather a consequence of sustained coercion. Netanyahu then shifted to the practical next steps. I instructed the negotiation team led by Minister Dermer to go to Cairo to finalise the technical details of the release of our hostages. Our intention, and the intention of our American friends, is to limit this negotiation to just a few days. The mention of a time limit was significant. It signalled both urgency and a refusal to allow the process to become protracted, a point reinforced by a direct reference to President Trump's own stance. And you heard President Trump this evening. He said clearly, "We will not tolerate stalling tactics, delays or evasions by Hamas." Quoting Trump's warning underscored that Washington was prepared to apply its own leverage to prevent the negotiations from bogging down. As Netanyahu spoke, the weight of his words was felt not just in the Knesset or the military command, but also in the homes of families still waiting for their loved ones. The promise of a comprehensive release of hostages offered a sliver of hope, but the caution in his tone suggested the journey was far from over. His reference to a very significant achievement resonated as both a declaration of progress and an acknowledgement of the challenges still ahead. The commitment to keeping the IDF in strategic positions within Gaza was an assertion that the concessions demanded by Hamas would not dictate Israel's security posture. The emphasis on the Trump plan revealed the growing importance of US diplomatic backing in shaping the conflict's trajectory. By crediting both the military campaign and the new diplomatic push, Netanyahu sought to present his government's approach as balanced, assertive on the battlefield, but pragmatic at the negotiating table. For many Israelis, the return of 207 hostages stood as proof that the strategy had yielded tangible results. But for the families of the 48 still in captivity, Netanyahu's pledge carried both hope and apprehension. Each passing day without their loved ones was a reminder of the human cost of the conflict. International observers noted that the framing of Hamas as isolated rather than Israel reflected a shift in global perception, one that Netanyahu was eager to highlight. The pressure on Hamas, he implied, was not just military, but also diplomatic and political. The mention of demilitarizing Gaza, whether by diplomacy or force, pointed to a vision that went beyond the immediate hostage crisis. It suggested a long-term goal of reshaping Gaza's security and political landscape, an ambition that would likely define Israel's policies for years to come. In closing, Netanyahu's remarks painted a picture of cautious optimism. He offered reassurance that progress was being made, credited the military for its sacrifices, aligned with Washington for strategic support, and set clear expectations for the coming days.